Hello, everyone. I'm Elaine Quijano. It's good to be with you. Thanks for joining us. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo formally announced his resignation late Tuesday morning.
And I think that given the circumstances, the best way I can help now is if I step aside and let government get back to governing. And therefore, that's what I'll do, because I work for you. And doing the right thing is doing the right thing for you. Because as we say, it's not about me, it's about we.
The announcement comes 1 week after a report from the state's attorney general accused the governor of sexually harassing 11 women in violation of state and federal law. He still faces scrutiny from the New York State Assembly for those accusations, in addition to his handling of COVID deaths in nursing homes and his alleged use of state funds to promote his book in 2020. Governor Cuomo gave himself 2 weeks to finish up before officially stepping down. After that, Lieutenant Governor Kathy Hochul will then become New York's first female governor. For more, I want to bring in Alyssa Katz and Anna Gronewald. Alyssa is the deputy editor of The City, and Anna is the co-author of Politico's New York Playbook. Welcome to you both. A big day. Alyssa, let me start with you. It was fascinating to watch and to listen to Governor Cuomo's statement. It began with, I think it's fair to call, a pugilistic tone. He himself talked about how he was a fighter in his political career, and then the announcement that he planned to step down. What may have ultimately factored into the governor's decision to resign?
Yeah, I mean, quite simply, Cuomo, who, had worked very aggressively to maintain a kind of wall of power around himself in New York State, really had no support left. He had the state assembly committing to move ahead with impeachment proceedings. He had numerous other Democrats saying that he should resign, including, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and President Joe Biden. He had top members of his staff resigning. And he had ultimately this report that came out a week ago from the state attorney general and independent investigators saying that he had broken the law and harassed numerous women, many of whom had worked for his office. And so it was not tenable any longer for him to remain in office, and therefore he resigned.
Anna, it was interesting as well to hear the governor talk about, in his view, changing sort of cultural norms. He did offer an apology at one point, but I wonder what you made of him going through essentially his list of accomplishments as he saw them with respect to, not this issue, but the things he's achieved that he clearly wanted to make sure were noted on the record at the time of this resignation announcement.
Like you said, I think it was a very stunning and a very quick resignation, despite the fact that we've been hearing about these allegations for months now. And at this point, that video, that statement could be the final word on Andrew Cuomo's legacy. And so there was a lot in there, and I'm sure it will take several more views to kind of unpack. But he stated that he felt he was in the right in some ways. He stated that he wanted to leave a different legacy for his daughters and for moving new generations of women forward. Then he also talked about all of the things that he can point to over his past decade in office, because I think this will be the final mark on his career as governor, and that's a really hard way to go out.
So, Alyssa, in the wake of this, how have New York State and congressional leaders been responding to the governor's resignation?
I mean, I think, we haven't honestly heard too much yet, as I think the state is absorbing this news, everyone in their own way. You had statements certainly from New York's current mayor, Bill de Blasio, and likely future mayor, Eric Adams, both saying, well, good, this needed to happen. Now we can move on, essentially. So I think, one reason we have not heard from many folks yet is that, now we have the prospect of a lieutenant governor stepping into the role of governor, and then an open, essentially, or sort of open election next year. And so you have a whole host of political players trying to figure out where they are situated in this new world where, the chess pieces move on a very tight board, and every move in or out of a job opens up another move. So we haven't heard so much yet from New York's leadership.
Well, Anna, Governor Cuomo's lawyer, Rita Glavin, spoke before his announcement, and she repeatedly questioned the fairness of Attorney General Letitia James's report. Let's play some of what she had to say.
This hasn't been, and it's not going to be, a fair process. And in fact, the governor has been given no process. I think that women should be believed, and they should be treated fairly. I also believe that men should be believed and treated fairly.
Anna, on this idea of due process, are her claims something that could also be investigated in the future? And what legal paths could Cuomo seek out in order to try and prove he was not given due process?
Well, certainly the report from James was not a trial. It was not, she did not recommend anything specific other than saying these are the facts as I found them. And even the Assembly Impeachment Committee said that they would be looking at that in accordance with other details that they ultimately would find themselves. It's unclear whether or not that will go forward, but that it wasn't a be-all, end-all necessarily, and I don't think that anyone was treating it that way, except for perhaps the governor's office, which was saying that because so many decisions, so many calls for resignation were based on that, it was ultimately taken that way, whether or not that was the full, the actual legal intent of it.
And Alyssa, as we mentioned, Lieutenant Governor Kathy Hochul will replace Cuomo in 2 weeks. She will be the first female governor of New York State. What more can you tell us about her as a leader, and how has she been preparing for this transition?
Yeah, so, Hochul was not Cuomo's first lieutenant governor, but she joined him in 2015 and, worked very closely with Cuomo, even though she's elected separately by the voters of New York. And he particularly would, and I say he would deploy her because very much she had worked under Cuomo's shadow and in coordination with Cuomo's agenda. She largely traveled around the state, especially to upstate regions, and she is from Buffalo, briefly represented an area in Buffalo in Congress, and so she often visited upstate. She also worked a lot, and I think this is very significant, on Cuomo's efforts that date back years to really position himself as a feminist, pro-woman governor. He very quickly after she had joined, she, toured the state to promote Cuomo's anti-campus sexual assault agenda, attended movie screenings with him of a documentary that was produced by his sister about campus sexual assault. And so she was very much kind of Cuomo's face often on women's issues. And that's a powerful irony given how she's coming into office now.
Yeah, a powerful irony indeed. And Anna, what kind of impact could Cuomo's resignation and Kathy Hochul's new role have on the New York State Democratic Party as a whole?
I think it will be a very interesting shift, a very interesting scramble even now, because people who were considering potentially jumping into a primary might think about the whole situation very differently if it would be against a Governor Kathy Hochul. We don't necessarily know if she would be the nominee, and there's a shifting, a domino effect, I guess, among politicians. If someone decides to run for one office, another one opens up, and so it could be a completely different ballgame without Cuomo in the mix. And I think it's also going to be interesting. Republicans were gunning for their chance, maybe. They thought that Cuomo was wounded enough that maybe they would have a shot at the executive mansion this year. If they're not running their nominee, Lee Zeldin, or presumptive nominee against Andrew Cuomo, again, the strategy might look completely different.
Yeah, Alyssa, what's your take on all of that? I mean, a moment ago, you talked about sort of chess pieces now quickly moving around with Governor Cuomo's announcement that he plans to resign. What can we now expect, you think, to see during next year's gubernatorial election?
Yeah, and it'll be very interesting to see how it shakes out, because certainly kind of mainstream Democrats have declined repeatedly to challenge Andrew Cuomo, just simply in part given the size of his campaign war chest. Right, he raised millions of dollars off of business interests who, were dealing with the state, and in fact, entanglements with some of those donors led to the corruption conviction of one of his top aides, Joe Percoco, who is currently in prison. So, with all of that money and power kind of swept aside, it's kind of an open field. But I can say, one name that's very interesting here is Attorney General Letitia James. Let's keep in mind that Cuomo himself was Attorney General before he became governor. And, during James's investigation, or the investigation she oversaw, Cuomo and his team repeatedly accused her of being motivated by politics and saying that she wanted his office and that's why she's trying to ruin him, basically. And now she's in the position of being quite popular with voters. There was a poll about who voters might want to see as the next governor, and she ranked very high on that. And now she, is in the position of quite possibly running, while not playing into that narrative that Cuomo had laid out, that she was just gunning for him the whole time.
Yeah, it's going to be really fascinating to see how all of this plays out. Certainly a seismic